He wasn't crying for himself. The German Shepherd K9 stood in the middle of a flooded Louisiana road, rain hammering his scarred back, amber eyes fixed on the black water swallowing the ditch beside him. Cars had passed. People had shouted. But the dog would not move. Then Staff Sergeant Noah Whitaker saw him in the headlights, soaked, bleeding from one paw, guarding the broken guardrail like it was a battlefield. "Easy, boy," Noah said, stepping out into knee-deep water. The dog barked once, hoarse and desperate, then grabbed Noah's sleeve and pulled. That was when Noah saw it. A minivan upside down below the road, almost completely buried in floodwater. He dove in, smashed the rear glass, and dragged out a young mother barely breathing. The rescue team yelled that the vehicle was clear, but the K9 went wild. He clawed at the mud, crying harder now, refusing to leave. Noah froze. Beneath the rushing water, he heard the smallest sound. Not thunder, not metal, a baby's breath. He dove again, vanished under the brown current, and came up with a yellow blanket in his arms. The baby did not cry. The mother whispered, "Please." Then the dog crawled beside the child, pressed his body against her tiny chest, and suddenly her fingers closed around his fur. He was not crying for himself. That was the first thing Staff Sergeant Noah Whitaker understood when his headlights found the German Shepherd K9 standing alone on the flooded road, his sable coat soaked black by rain, his paws planted in the rushing water as if the whole storm had ordered him to move and he had refused. The road outside Lake Charles, Louisiana, had already disappeared beneath nearly 2 feet of muddy floodwater, and the night was full of small, frightened sounds. Rain snapping against the hood of Noah's truck, wind pushing through drowned cypress branches, loose road signs tapping against their posts like tired bells. Somewhere far off, a transformer hummed and died, leaving the world darker by 1 more degree. Noah had been driving back from a volunteer rescue post near the parish line, his white hands stiff on the wheel, his jacket smelling of diesel, river mud, and cold coffee. He was 37, a United States Marine with close-cut brown hair, pale skin weathered by sun and salt, and gray-blue eyes that never quite stopped scanning the horizon, even when there was no horizon left to scan. He had spent the last 12 hours helping families out of low homes, carrying medicine through waist-high water, lifting old photo albums onto shelves that might still stay dry. He had seen fear that day. He had seen exhaustion, but he had not seen anything like the dog in the road. The German Shepherd stood beside a broken guardrail, trembling so hard the rain seemed to bounce off him. His ears were pinned back, not in surrender, but in grief. His amber eyes were fixed on a dark ditch where water poured like a moving wall. Every few seconds, he lowered his head and made a sound Noah felt more than heard, a thin, wounded cry that cut through the storm and reached some quiet place inside him he thought the Marine Corps had trained into stone. Noah slowed the truck until the tires pushed a small wave ahead of them. He stopped 50 feet away, killed the engine, and sat for 1 second in the sudden silence after machinery. The dog did not run. He did not come closer. He only turned his head toward Noah, rain sliding from his muzzle, and barked once. It was hoarse, almost broken, but it carried a command. Noah opened the door and stepped down into water that swallowed his boots to the ankle. "Easy, boy," he said, keeping his voice low, the way he had learned around working dogs, wounded people, and men on the edge of panic. "I see you." The K9 backed away 2 steps, then rushed forward again, not toward Noah's hand, but toward the gap in the guardrail. He spun once, slipped in the mud, caught himself, and cried toward the ditch. Noah's chest tightened. A stray dog would have searched for shelter. A frightened dog would have fled from headlights. This one was holding position. That meant something. Noah moved closer. The rain came sideways now, stinging his face, filling his collar, turning the road into a river of red clay and oil shine. When he reached the dog, he saw the faint shape of an old tactical collar under the wet fur, worn almost smooth, with no readable tag. From where he stood, the shepherd's front paw was scraped raw from digging at the mud near the shoulder of the road, but he still planted it down and leaned toward the flooded ditch with a desperate insistence. Noah crouched, one knee dipping into cold water. "What are you guarding?" he whispered. The dog's answer was immediate. He lunged, gripped Noah's sleeve gently between his teeth, and pulled. Not hard enough to hurt, hard enough to beg. Noah followed, past the bent guardrail, The ground dropped into a drainage ditch swollen far beyond its banks. The beam from Noah's flashlight shook across brown water, branches, floating leaves, and then something pale beneath the surface. At first he thought it was a slab of broken fencing. Then the water shifted, and he saw the curved roofline of a vehicle. A minivan. Upside down. Nearly swallowed. For a moment Noah's breath stopped. The van rested at an angle against a half-submerged tree, its rear wheels barely visible above the water, its windows dark and smeared with mud. No hazard lights. No horn. No movement. Only the rain, the flood, and the German shepherd crying as though he had been holding back the night by will alone. Noah raised his radio from his vest, thumbed the button, and called for rescue, giving the mile marker twice, slow and clear. Static answered first, then a voice broken by weather. Units were delayed. Roads were washed out. 10 minutes, maybe more. 10 minutes could be a lifetime. Noah looked down at the dog. You stayed here for them, didn't you? The shepherd's eyes locked on his. In those eyes, Noah saw no confusion, no instinctless fear, only the steady, terrible focus of an animal who had been trained to understand one sacred thing. Someone was still missing. Noah returned to his truck, grabbed a tow strap, a flashlight, and a small emergency hammer from the console. The dog followed close, limping but unwilling to fall behind. Noah tied one end of the strap around his waist and secured the other to the truck's front hook, testing it twice. The floodwater beside the ditch moved faster than it looked, pushing branches past with quiet force. He had crossed worse overseas, but water at night had its own kind of cruelty. It hid depth. It hid current. It hid time. Stay, Noah told the dog. The K9 whined, stepping forward. Noah pointed to the road. Ranger, he said suddenly, though he did not know why that name came to him. Maybe because the dog looked like one. Maybe because every lost soldier deserved a call sign. Stay here. The shepherd froze at the name. Just for half a second. Long enough for Noah to notice. Then the dog lowered his head, as if the sound had touched some buried memory. Noah stepped into the ditch. Cold struck his legs first, then his ribs as he slid deeper, one hand on the strap, the other gripping the hammer. The current shoved against him, trying to turn his body sideways. Mud sucked at his boots. He reached the van by inches, breathing hard, rain filling his eyes. Through the rear side window, he saw darkness, a drifting ribbon, something that might have been a purse. He tapped the glass with the flashlight. Nothing. He struck the corner of the window with the emergency hammer. Once. Twice. The glass cracked, then folded inward in harmless little cubes, swallowed by the water. Noah reached inside, felt along the roof, the seat, a shoulder belt. His fingers found fabric. Then an arm. A woman, still strapped in, head turned sideways above a pocket of trapped air barely larger than a shoebox. Noah's heart slammed against his ribs. Ma'am, he called, keeping his voice steady though the flood pulled at his back. I'm getting you out. She did not answer, but when his hand touched her shoulder, she gave the smallest movement, a shiver of life. Behind him, on the road, the German shepherd barked. Once, then again. Not random. A warning. A plea. Noah cut the seat belt with the blade from his rescue tool and guided the woman free, careful, patient, refusing to let the water take her weight too fast. She was young, maybe late 20s, her face pale under strands of wet blonde hair, her hands cold but not empty of life. Noah pulled her through the broken window and back toward the road, the tow strapped tight against his waist. When he reached shallow water, 2 volunteers who had arrived from a nearby truck helped lift her onto the pavement. Someone wrapped her in a silver emergency blanket. Someone said the van was clear. Noah almost believed it. Then the K9 screamed. It was not a bark this time. It was a sound so raw that every person on that flooded road turned toward him. The dog had run back to the broken guardrail. He was clawing at the mud, digging with his injured paw, staring not at the woman, not at Noah, but at the rear of the sunken minivan. Noah felt the blood drain from his face. The rescue lights swept over the water again. The rear section was lower, pressed into silt, almost invisible beneath a mat of branches. A child seat could be back there. A bag. A stroller. Something too small for the eye, but not too small for a loyal dog's ear. The young mother stirred beneath the blanket. Her lips moved. Noah leaned close. At first, he heard only rain. Then one word broke through, thin as breath on glass. Baby. The whole road went still. Noah turned back to the water. Ranger stood at the edge, shaking, eyes burning into him. And Noah knew then that the dog had not been guarding a wreck. He had been guarding a promise. The word struck Noah harder than the rain. Baby. It passed from the mother's lips into the storm, and for one breath, every person on that flooded road forgot how to move. The volunteers stared at the half-sunken minivan. The emergency blanket snapped in the wind. Ranger stood at the broken guardrail, body low, ears forward, trembling with a kind of urgency no command could teach. Noah did not wait for anyone to tell him what came next. He tightened the tow strap around his waist, checked the knot with stiff fingers, and stepped back toward the ditch. Keep the line tight, he said. His voice was calm, but inside his chest something old and familiar had awakened, the clean, cold focus of a mission with no room for fear. The water hit him like a moving wall when he dropped from the shoulder again. It climbed to his ribs, then his chest, smelling of mud, pine branches, gasoline, and the deep sourness of the flooded earth. The flashlight beam shook across the overturned van, turning rain into silver needles. Behind him, someone called that the current was getting worse. Noah heard it, but did not turn. Ranger barked once from above. Not panic. Direction. Noah followed the sound. The dog had moved 10 feet along the guardrail and was staring at the rear of the vehicle, where the mud rose almost to the broken bumper. That was where Noah aimed. Each step was a fight. The ditch floor dipped without warning, and the current shoved his leg sideways. The tow strap tightened, saving him from slipping farther. He took one breath, then another, and reached the back of the van. The rear window was underwater, hidden beneath a net of leaves and thin branches. Noah cleared them with one hand, feeling for edges, handles, anything that might give. The water was too dark to see through. He struck the glass carefully with the emergency hammer, once near the corner, then again. A muted crack rolled through the frame. He pulled away the loosened pieces and reached inside. His fingers touched nothing at first but floating fabric and the smooth back of a seat. Then something brushed his wrist. A small strap. A buckle. A child's safety seat turned sideways, partly trapped beneath mud and debris. Noah's throat tightened. I found the seat, he called, but the rain took half his words. The volunteers pulled the line tighter. Ranger let out a high whine that rose and fell like a prayer. Noah pressed his shoulder against the van and reached deeper. The safety seat would not move. The belt was jammed. Mud had packed around the base, holding it in place like cement. He worked by touch, slow and careful, because speed could turn hope into mistake. His hands found the release button, but it was clogged. He pulled the small rescue blade from his vest and cut through the strap one layer at a time. Above him, the mother's voice broke through the storm, faint and ragged. Lily, she whispered. Her name is Lily. The name entered the water with Noah. It became a light in the dark. I have you, Lily, he said, though he did not know if she could hear. He freed the final strap and tried to lift the seat, but it caught again. Something was wedged beneath it. Noah lowered his head, tasted rain and floodwater on his lips, and pushed his arm farther until his shoulder burned. His fingers found a yellow blanket, twisted around the base of the seat. He loosened it gently. The safety seat shifted. Just 1 inch. Then 2. From the road, Ranger suddenly stopped whining. He went completely still. Noah knew that stillness. He had seen it in trained dogs before. The exact moment instinct sharpened into certainty. Pull slow, Noah called. The volunteers eased the tow strap backward as he guided the seat through the broken rear window. It resisted, scraped, then came free into his arms. It was heavier than he expected, not because of the child, but because of the water and mud soaked into every fold. He turned, holding it high against his chest, and began the slow walk back. The current fought him harder now, pushing at his knees, tugging at the seat. Noah kept his body between Lily and the water, one hand locked around the carrier, the other on the line. Ranger waited at the shoulder, front paws almost in the flood, eyes fixed on the yellow blanket. When Noah reached the road, 2 volunteers helped him lift the carrier onto the pavement. Someone opened the blanket. Someone else gasped, then went silent. Lily was tiny, no more than a few months old, her face pale beneath the rain, her little body frighteningly still in the safety seat. Noah dropped to his knees. The mother tried to sit up, but a woman beside her held her gently down. My baby, she kept saying, each word breaking smaller than the last. Noah worked with steady hands. He cleared water from Lily's face, checked for breath, checked for a pulse so faint he had to close his eyes to feel it. Ranger crawled closer on his belly, ignoring the people who tried to hold him back. He stopped beside Lily and placed his wet muzzle near her small hand. Noah began careful breaths, then gentle compressions with 2 fingers, counting under his breath, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to keep time against the storm. Come on, Lily. Stay with us. The road seemed to shrink around them. Rain fell on Noah's neck. Blue and red lights flickered far away, still trapped beyond the washed-out bend. The volunteers stood in a half-circle, useless and praying in the same breath. Ranger did not move. He laid himself along Lily's side, offering the only warmth he had left. His soaked body shook, but he stayed close, his amber eyes on Noah's hands. A minute passed, then another. Nothing. The mother covered her mouth. The wind pushed hard across the flooded road, and for one terrible second, even Noah felt the edge of surrender. He lowered his head close to Lily and whispered, "Not after he waited for you." Ranger lifted his muzzle and released one soft cry, so low it almost disappeared under the rain. Then Lily's fingers twitched. Noah froze. Her tiny hand opened, searching without strength, and closed around a tuft of wet fur at Ranger's neck. The dog stopped shaking. Noah felt again for the pulse. There it was, small but present, like a match protected from the wind. "She is here," Noah said, his voice breaking despite himself. "She is still here." And then, from the smallest chest on that drowned road, came a thin, fragile cough, followed by a cry that made every person standing there fall silent. For one full second after Lily cried, no one spoke. The sound was too small to belong to the storm and too powerful to be mistaken for anything else. It rose from the yellow blanket in a thin, trembling note, and the whole flooded road seemed to breathe again. The young mother reached out from beneath the emergency blanket, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks, and Noah carried Lily carefully to her, keeping the child wrapped tight against the cold. "She is breathing," he said, though everyone could hear it now. "Keep her warm. Keep talking to her." The mother pressed her lips to her baby's forehead and whispered the same name over and over, as if saying it could anchor Lily to the world. Ranger stayed close, his wet body curved beside them, amber eyes half closed, but his ears still listening. Noah noticed that, even after everything, the dog had not relaxed. His work was not finished, or he did not believe it was. Far down the road, red and blue lights flickered through the rain, bending around the washed-out curve. A rescue truck finally appeared, tires pushing slow waves across the flooded pavement. 2 paramedics stepped out carrying medical bags and warm blankets. They moved with calm speed, checking Lily first, then her mother, then Noah, whose hands had started to shake only now that he no longer needed them to be steady. A paramedic asked his name. He answered without looking away from Ranger. "Noah Whitaker, United States Marine Corps." The paramedic nodded, then glanced at the German Shepherd. "Is he yours?" Noah almost said no. The truth was simple. He had never seen the dog before that night. But Ranger was leaning against his leg as if he had known him for years, as if Noah had merely arrived late to a promise the dog had been keeping alone. "Not yet," Noah said quietly. The paramedic did not question it. A second volunteer tried to guide Ranger toward the rescue truck, but the dog resisted, turning back toward the ditch. Noah followed his gaze. The minivan was nearly invisible now, swallowed by rising water and branches. There was no more crying from inside. No movement. Nothing left but the empty shell of a bad night. Still, Ranger stared at it with solemn attention. Noah knelt beside him and ran one hand over the dog's neck, feeling the tremor under the fur. "You did it," he whispered. "You brought us to them." Only then did Ranger lower his head. His injured paw lifted slightly, no longer able to bear weight. He had been standing through rain, current, and exhaustion for longer than anyone knew. Noah slipped his arms under the shepherd's chest and hips, careful not to press the paw, and lifted him into the back of the rescue truck. Ranger did not fight. He simply rested his head against Noah's shoulder, and the weight of that trust nearly broke something open inside him. The ride to the emergency shelter took less than 15 minutes, but it felt suspended outside time. Lily lay wrapped in heated blankets with a tiny oxygen mask near her face. Her mother, whose name was Claire Bennett, kept one hand on the child and the other on Ranger's damp fur. She had pale skin, blue eyes red from crying, and a voice that shook each time she tried to speak. "I remember the water," she whispered. "The road gave way so fast. I could not get to her. I thought nobody would see us." Noah sat across from her, soaked to the bone, his elbows on his knees. "He saw you," he said. Claire looked at Ranger. The dog had curled on a folded tarp, eyes open, watching Lily like she was still under his command. "I heard barking before I blacked out," Claire said. "Not close. Above us." He would not stop. Noah looked down at the old collar again. In the brighter light of the shelter bay, he could finally see what the rain had hidden. The collar was tactical grade, faded green, with a small metal plate scratched almost unreadable. He brushed mud away with his thumb. 3 letters appeared first. K9. Then a service number. Then a name that was not Ranger. Atlas. Noah went still. "Atlas," he murmured. The German shepherd lifted his head. Not much. Just enough. Noah felt the air change around him. That was his real name. Not a guess. Not a call sign. A memory returned. At the shelter, nurses and volunteers moved between cots and supply tables, handing out dry socks, coffee, and blankets. The whole place smelled of antiseptic, wet wool, and overworked generators. Noah found a veterinarian volunteer near the rear entrance, a gray-haired woman named Dr. Marlene Porter, who had been treating pets pulled from flooded neighborhoods all evening. She examined Atlas gently beneath a portable lamp. "He is dehydrated," she said. "Exhausted. Paws scraped up, but not beyond care. This dog has been working through pain." Noah watched Atlas remain still under her hands. Even tired, the shepherd carried discipline in every breath. "Can you scan him?" Noah asked. Dr. Porter passed a microchip scanner along his shoulder. It beeped. She read the number aloud, then typed it into an emergency database on a tablet. For a few moments, only rain on the shelter roof filled the silence. Then her expression softened in a way that made Noah's stomach tighten. "He was registered to a Marine," she said. "Corporal Daniel Mercer. Search and rescue support. Based out of Camp Lejeune before reassignment to Louisiana Emergency Response last year." Noah leaned closer. The name touched something distant in him. He had heard it once, maybe in a briefing, maybe from another Marine over bad coffee and shared grief. Dr. Porter continued carefully. "The record says Corporal Mercer passed during flood rescue operations last fall. Atlas was listed as missing afterward." Claire, still holding Lily nearby, looked up. Her face changed. The shelter noise seemed to fade around them. Noah turned toward the dog. Atlas was watching the rain beyond the open bay door, eyes reflecting the emergency lights, body still but not empty. A year ago, he had lost the Marine he loved in floodwater. Tonight, on another drowned road, he had found another family slipping away. And he had stayed. Not because anyone ordered him. Not because a leash held him. Because loyalty, once planted deep enough, does not ask whether the mission is over. Noah reached for the scratched metal plate on Atlas's collar and closed his fingers around it. Outside, thunder rolled softly beyond the parish line. Inside, Lily gave a quiet sound in her sleep, and Atlas turned his head at once, ears rising, ready again. The shelter did not sleep that night. Rain kept beating the metal roof in steady waves, and every few minutes the doors opened to let in another family, another soaked blanket, another animal carried in trembling arms. Fluorescent lights hummed above rows of cots. Coffee steamed in paper cups. Volunteers spoke softly, as if the storm outside had made everyone careful with their words. Noah sat near the rear wall with a dry towel over his shoulders, his boots leaving muddy prints beneath the folding chair, but his eyes stayed on Atlas. The German shepherd lay on a clean blanket beside Lily's cot, his injured paw wrapped in white gauze, his head resting low between his front legs. He looked empty with exhaustion, yet every time Lily moved, every time the tiny monitor beside her gave a soft beep, his ears lifted. Claire noticed it too. She sat on the cot with Lily bundled against her chest, one hand touching the baby's back, the other resting on the edge of Atlas's blanket. "He acts like he has always known her," she whispered. Noah looked at the scratched collar plate in his palm. Atlas. Corporal Daniel Mercer. A name, a number, a history almost washed away by 1 year of rain and wandering. Maybe he knows what it means when someone needs him, Noah said. Claire nodded, but her eyes filled again. I do not know how to thank him. Atlas opened one eye, as if thanks had never been part of the agreement. Near dawn, Dr. Marlene Porter returned with an older man in a parish emergency jacket. His name was Harold Gaines, and he had the stooped shoulders of someone who had carried too many sandbags and too many stories. He had worked the rescue registry during the flood the year before. When he saw Atlas, he stopped at the edge of the blanket and removed his cap. Lord have mercy, he said quietly. Noah stood. You know him? Harold swallowed hard. Everybody on the Southern Rescue Line knew that dog. Atlas and Corporal Mercer pulled people out when roads were gone and radios were failing. Mercer was the kind of Marine who would give away his last dry jacket and pretend he was not cold. Noah listened without interrupting. Outside the shelter windows, the black sky had softened to charcoal. Harold crouched slowly, not reaching for Atlas, only letting the dog smell the years on him. Atlas lifted his head. His tail moved once against the blanket. Not a wag, a recognition. Harold's voice lowered. After Mercer passed, Atlas would not leave the last rescue site. Crews searched for him for days. Then another rain came through, and he disappeared. Some said a family took him in. Some said he went feral. I figured grief had carried him somewhere we could not follow. Noah looked at the dog, at the hollow spaces behind his ribs, at the disciplined way he stayed between Lily and the doors. He did not disappear, Noah said. He kept working. Harold's eyes shone under the harsh light. That sounds like Mercer. The name stirred Atlas again. His ears rose, and for the first time all night he tried to stand. Noah moved quickly, steadying him with both hands. The dog leaned into him, weak but determined, looking past them toward the open bay door where the rain had thinned into a gray curtain. A rescue truck idled outside, its lights painting red across the wet pavement. Someone had brought in a sealed plastic evidence bag from the minivan, items recovered before the water. Rose too high. A purse, a phone, a child's small sock, and a soaked photograph from the dashboard. A volunteer placed them on the intake table near Claire. She looked at the photograph and covered her mouth. Noah turned. The picture showed Claire, Lily, and a young man in a marine dress uniform standing beside a charity flood drive sign. The man's arm was around Claire's shoulders. His smile was tired but bright. On the lower corner of the photo, written in blue ink, were the words for Daniel Mercer Relief Day. Claire stared at the photograph as if it had opened a door she did not know was in the room. My husband volunteered at that drive, she said softly. He was not a Marine. He was a teacher. He brought diapers, canned food, blankets. He talked to a Marine there for nearly an hour about search dogs. Harold leaned closer to the photo. That is Mercer beside him, he said. The room seemed to draw in one breath. Claire's husband had met Daniel Mercer before Lily was born, before the last flood, before Atlas vanished into the long, wet silence of the parish roads. Two families, one brief act of kindness, one photograph nearly lost under dirty water. Noah felt the small hairs on his arms rise. It was not proof of anything a report could measure. It was not a neat answer. It was the kind of pattern life sometimes leaves behind when mercy walks farther than memory. Claire looked down at Atlas. Daniel helped my husband that day, she whispered. And last night his dog found us. Atlas lowered his muzzle to the blanket again, but his eyes stayed open. Lily made a soft sound, no louder than a sigh. The shepherd answered with a breath of his own, slow and tired. Noah knelt beside him and finally saw the whole weight of it. Atlas had not only heard a baby beneath floodwater. He had heard a promise echoing from the man who raised him, the Marine who taught him that a life in danger was never someone else's problem. Dr. Porter checked Atlas's bandage, then looked at Noah. He needs rest. Real rest. No more roads. No more wandering. Noah nodded, but the words settled heavily. Rest sounded simple. Rest required a home. Atlas had belonged to a Marine who was gone. His registration was old. His next of kin file was blank. He was a hero with no address, a survivor whose last mission had nearly spent everything he had left. Claire looked at Noah, then at Atlas. He should not go back to a kennel, she said. Not after this. Noah did not answer at once. He thought of his quiet rental house outside town, the empty porch, the folded flag from a friend's funeral kept in a drawer he rarely opened, the silence he had pretended was peace. He had spent years telling himself that some losses were easier if nothing new came close enough to matter. Then Atlas lifted his head, and placed his chin on Noah's knee. No demand, no performance, just trust, offered with the last strength of a weary dog. Noah placed his hand over the shepherd's damp fur. "No," he said gently. "He is not going back to a kennel." Outside, the storm began to break. A thin line of morning light touched the flooded parking lot, turning every puddle silver. Inside the shelter, Lily slept against her mother's heart, and Atlas closed his eyes at last, still touching Noah, as if the road, the rain, and the long year alone had finally loosened their grip. By mid-morning, the rain had weakened to a mist, but the parish still looked as if the sky had set everything down in water and forgotten to lift it back. Noah drove slowly through streets glazed with brown runoff, Atlas resting on a folded blanket across the back seat of his truck. The German shepherd had been cleared to leave the shelter under observation, his injured paw bandaged, his body wrapped in a borrowed towel that smelled faintly of laundry soap and antiseptic. Every few minutes, Noah glanced in the rearview mirror. Atlas did not sleep deeply. His eyes opened at every siren, every shout from a roadside crew, every distant rumble of a generator. Yet when Noah spoke his name, the dog's gaze softened. "You are safe now, Atlas," Noah said, though he knew safety was not something a person could hand over in a single sentence. It had to be proven, meal by meal, quiet hour by quiet hour, open door by open door. Noah's rental house, set 7 miles north of Lake Charles, raised on short concrete piers at the end of a gravel lane lined with live oaks. It was small, white, and plain, with a screened porch, a leaning mailbox, and wind chimes that had not sung in months. The yard was damp, but not flooded. Spanish moss hung from the trees like gray ribbons, and the air smelled of wet grass, cedar boards, and the first week's sunlight after disaster. Noah parked beside the porch and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. He had brought people home before. He had carried wounded men to helicopters, guided children through evacuation centers, helped strangers find relatives in crowded gyms. But bringing Atlas here felt different. It was not rescue anymore. It was invitation. He opened the back door carefully. Atlas lifted his head, ears moving, eyes studying the porch, the yard, the quiet windows. He did not jump out. He waited. Noah understood. A dog who had lost a handler did not give his trust to walls just because they had a roof. "No pressure," Noah said. "Take your time." He stepped back. Atlas sniffed the air for a long while, then placed one paw on the running board, remembered the bandage, and paused. Noah slid one arm under his chest and helped him down. The dog leaned against him, not from weakness alone, but from a cautious need to know Noah would not vanish the moment his paws touched ground. They climbed the porch together. Inside, the house held the smell of dust, old coffee, canvas gear, and cedar shelves. A folded Marine Corps sweatshirt lay over the back of a chair. A pair of boots stood by the door, perfectly aligned out of habit. On the wall near the hallway hung a photograph of Noah with 3 other Marines in desert sunlight, all of them younger, all of them smiling like the future owed them nothing but time. Atlas stopped beneath the photograph. His nose lifted. He studied the faces with a stillness that made Noah's throat tighten. "Friends," Noah said softly. "Some still here, some not." Atlas looked back at him, and for a heartbeat the room seemed to understand both of them. Noah set a bowl of water in the kitchen and placed another blanket near the window where a square of pale sun had fallen onto the floor. Atlas drank slowly, then turned in a circle, and lowered himself onto the blanket with a tired sigh. His eyes stayed open, following Noah as he moved through the kitchen. Noah made a small plate of chicken and rice, plain and warm, the way Dr. Porter had suggested. Atlas took it carefully, bite by bite, never rushing, as if food was something that might be taken away if he loved it too openly. Noah sat on the floor a few feet from him. "Nobody is taking it," he said. "Not here." Outside, a truck passed on the gravel lane, and Atlas flinched, lifting his head. Noah did not reach too fast. He only stayed where he was, breathing evenly, letting the quiet rebuild itself. After a while, Atlas lowered his head again. That was the first small miracle of the day. Near noon, Noah's phone rang. The screen showed the shelter number. Claire's voice came through tired but steadier. Lily had been transferred to a children's hospital in Baton Rouge for monitoring, but she was warm, breathing on her own, and holding down milk. Claire said the doctors were hopeful. She said it twice. as if the words still felt unfamiliar in her mouth. Noah closed his eyes. "That is good news," he said. Atlas lifted his head at Lily's name, though Noah had not spoken it loudly. Claire heard the movement through the phone. "Is he with you?" she asked. "Yes. He is home." The word left Noah before he had fully decided to trust it. "Home." Across the line, Claire went quiet. Then she said, "When Lily opened her hand this morning, there was dog hair in her fingers. The nurse tried to wipe it away, but I asked her not to." "Not yet." Noah looked at Atlas, who was watching him from the blanket with solemn eyes. "He gave her something to hold on to," Noah said. "I think maybe she gave him something too," Claire replied. After the call ended, Noah stepped onto the porch. The mist had stopped. Water dripped from the oak leaves in slow, bright beads. Somewhere in the distance, chainsaws began clearing fallen branches. The parish was damaged, but alive. Behind him, nails clicked softly on the floorboards. Atlas had followed, moving carefully on 3 good paws. He stood beside Noah at the screen door, looking out at the wet yard as if searching for orders. Written in the grass. Noah opened the door. Atlas stepped onto the porch, sniffed the air, and looked toward the road. His body tightened. For a moment Noah feared he would run, pulled by some unfinished map of grief. But Atlas only took 3 steps to the top stair, then stopped. He turned back to Noah, waiting, asking. Noah descended first, and Atlas followed. They walked slowly around the yard, past the leaning mailbox, past a puddle where the morning sky floated broken and blue. At the far fence, Atlas found a small patch of dry earth beneath the oak and lowered himself there. Noah sat beside him, not too close, not too far. The sun broke through the clouds and touched the dog's wet fur, turning the sable coat warm again. Atlas closed his eyes for almost 10 seconds. No siren woke him. No command called him back into floodwater. No lost voice pulled him toward the ditch. For those 10 seconds, he was only a tired dog in a quiet yard, with a Marine sitting beside him and a bowl waiting inside. Noah looked at the old collar plate in his hand. Atlas. Corporal Daniel Mercer. The metal was scratched, but the name remained. He thought about replacing it with a new tag, something clean and easy to read. Then he understood that some scars were not damage. Some were testimony. He would add to it, not erase it. A new tag beside the old one. A new address beside the old promise. Atlas opened his eyes and looked at him. Noah smiled faintly. "We will do this right," he said. "No replacing. No forgetting. Just forward." The wind chimes on the porch moved for the first time that morning, sending a thin silver sound through the damp air. Atlas laid his head on Noah's boot, and the gesture was so gentle, so final, that Noah did not move for a long while. He let the weight rest there. He let the silence become something other than empty. Somewhere miles away, Lily slept. Somewhere behind them, the storm was passing. And in a small yard north of Lake Charles, a Marine and a lost K-9 began learning the shape of peace. That evening, after the last of the sunlight slipped behind the live oaks, Noah learned that peace did not arrive all at once. It came in. Peace is small enough to miss if a man was not paying attention. It came when Atlas ate a full bowl without looking over his shoulder. It came when the German shepherd stepped onto the screened porch and did not scan the road for danger. It came when Noah left the kitchen for 2 minutes and returned to find Atlas still lying on the blanket, trusting that the room would remain kind in his absence. Yet the night carried its own weather. A little after midnight, a distant siren passed along the highway, soft and fading, but Atlas rose so quickly his water bowl rattled against the floor. His ears stood sharp. His injured paw hovered above the boards. Noah woke on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, and sat up slowly. "Atlas," he said, not loud, not commanding. The dog stood rigid at the screen door, staring into the dark yard where moonlight touched the puddles like broken glass. Noah walked to him with bare feet on cool wood. "You are not back there," he whispered. "You are here." Atlas did not move. His chest rose and fell fast, but he made no sound. Noah knew that silence. He had worn it himself after coming home, when a slammed car door could turn a grocery store parking lot into another country, when rain on a roof could become rotors in the dark, when sleep felt less like rest and more like a place where memory waited. He sat on the floor beside the dog, leaving space between them, and placed one hand palm up on his knee. He did not touch Atlas until the dog chose it. Minutes passed. The house breathed around them. The refrigerator hummed. Water dripped from the porch gutter. Far away, the siren disappeared. At last Atlas lowered his head and pressed his muzzle into Noah's open hand. It was not surrender. It was permission. Noah gently rubbed the fur between his eyes. "I know," he said. "Some storms keep going after the rain stops." By morning, the parish emergency office had called twice. Reporters were asking about the Marine and the K-9 who found the baby. A local station wanted an interview. A veterans group wanted to honor Atlas. Noah declined everything that could wait. Atlas did not need cameras. Lily did not need a headline. Claire needed sleep. And Noah needed to keep a promise he had made in the quiet before dawn, when a tired dog trusted him with the weight of an old name. He drove Atlas to Dr. Porter's small clinic near the edge of town, a low brick building with white shutters, potted ferns, and a hand-painted sign that had survived the storm with only one corner chipped. The waiting room smelled of clean towels and dog biscuits. Atlas hesitated at the door, his body remembering too many places where doors meant separation. Noah crouched beside him. "I go in with you," he said. "I come out with you." Atlas looked into his face, then stepped forward. Dr. Porter changed the bandage, checked his hydration, listened to his heart, and smiled for the first time since Noah had met her. "Strong heartbeat," she said. "Tired, but strong. He needs a few weeks of quiet, food, and someone who understands that heroes still limp." Noah looked at Atlas, who was pretending not to enjoy the gentle scratch behind his ear. "I can manage quiet," Noah said. Dr. Porter gave him a look over her glasses. "Can you manage being needed?" The question stayed with him longer than he expected. On the drive home, Atlas rested his chin on the back seat, eyes half closed. Noah passed flooded fields where egrets stood like white prayers among the reeds, past church volunteers handing out bottled water, past a school gym with a banner that read relief supplies. Everywhere, people were cleaning, carrying, calling across yards. Disaster had loosened the town, but it had also revealed the hands holding it together. At a red light, Noah's phone buzzed. A message from Claire appeared with a photograph. Lily was asleep in a hospital bassinet, cheeks pinker now, one tiny fist curled beside her face. Beside the bassinet lay the yellow blanket, washed but still faintly stained by the flood. Claire's message was simple. She opened her eyes today. Noah stared at the words until the light changed. In the back seat, Atlas lifted his head, as if the good news had a scent. "She is fighting," Noah said. The dog's tail moved once against the blanket. That afternoon, Noah stopped at a small pet supply store that had reopened on generator power. He bought a heavy ceramic bowl, a soft bed big enough for a German shepherd to stretch without touching the edges, a leash, a brush, and a plain brass tag. The young cashier recognized him from a photo someone had posted online, but she said nothing dramatic. She only rang up the items, then placed a small blue chew toy into the bag without charging him. "For him," she said softly. Noah nodded. Outside in the truck, Atlas sniffed the toy with suspicion, then rested one paw over it, as if claiming it for official duty. At home, Noah set the new bed by the window, but Atlas chose the floor beside Noah's chair instead. That was all right. Trust had its own map. Noah cooked rice again, added chicken, filled the new bowl with clean water, and opened the back door so the evening air could move through the house. The wind chimes rang lightly. Atlas ate, then limped to the porch and watched the road. Not with panic this time, with memory. Noah sat beside him and took the brass tag from his pocket. He had asked the store to engrave it while he waited. On one side, it read Atlas. On the other, Noah Whitaker and the house number. He did not remove the old collar plate. He slid the new tag beside it, so the two pieces of metal touched with a small sound like a bell. Atlas turned his head. Noah fastened the collar carefully. "You had a good Marine before me," he said. "I will not ask you to forget him." Atlas held still, eyes fixed on Noah's face. "But you can stay here as long as you want." For the first time since the flooded road, Atlas gave a real wag of his tail. Small, uneven, more felt than seen. Noah smiled, and something in his chest loosened. Later, as darkness settled over the yard, a truck slowed near the mailbox, then continued on. Atlas lifted his ears, but he did not stand. He only leaned his shoulder against Noah's leg. Inside the house, the blue chew toy lay untouched in the middle of the kitchen like a promise waiting for morning. Noah looked out at the wet fields beyond the trees and thought of Daniel Mercer, of Claire and Lily, of all the quiet lives tied together by one dog who refused to abandon a sound no one else could hear. The world outside was still wounded. Roads were still closed. Families were still counting what had been lost. But on that porch, under the soft ringing of wind chimes, a Marine and a German shepherd sat through the first calm night after the storm, learning that rescue is not always the moment someone is pulled from danger. Sometimes rescue begins afterward, when someone stays. By the third morning after the flood, the sky over Lake Charles turned a clean pale blue, the kind of blue that looked almost unfair above streets still lined with ruined furniture and soaked drywall. Noah woke before sunrise to the sound of Atlas moving through the house. Not pacing, exploring. The German shepherd walked slowly from room to room, nails clicking softly, pausing at thresholds as if asking each space for permission to exist there. He sniffed the hallway, the laundry room, the base of the stairs, then returned to the kitchen where Noah stood making coffee. The brass tag at his collar touched the old service plate with a quiet chime. New name beside old duty. New address beside memory. Morning, partner, Noah said. Atlas looked up at him, and this time his tail moved without hesitation. It was not big. It did not need to be. Some victories entered a room quietly. After breakfast, Noah brushed the mud-stiff places from Atlas's coat on the porch while sunlight warmed the wet boards. Sable fur lifted under the brush, soft beneath the old tangles, and Atlas closed his eyes with the cautious pleasure of a dog learning that hands could bring comfort without asking for anything in return. Noah worked slowly around the bandaged paw, around the ribs that still showed too clearly, around the collar where the two tags rested together. Halfway through, his phone rang. It was Claire. Her voice sounded different now, still tired, but no longer standing at the edge of fear. Lily's oxygen levels were steady. Doctors expected a full recovery. They would be discharged soon, maybe the next day if the numbers held. Noah closed his eyes and let the words settle. Atlas lifted his head at the sound of Lily's name, ears forward, body alert. Claire laughed softly through the phone. Did he hear me? He hears everything, Noah said. There was a pause. Then Claire asked if she could come by when Lily was strong enough. Not for cameras, not for interviews, just to see the dog who had stayed. Noah looked at Atlas. The shepherd was staring toward the road, as if he already knew someone was coming. Yes, Noah said. He would like that. The next afternoon, a white county van rolled slowly up the gravel lane, sunlight flashing across its windshield. Atlas was asleep near the porch steps when the tires crunched over the stones. His head rose at once, but he did not bark. Noah stood beside him, one hand loose at his side. The van door opened, and Claire stepped out carefully, pale but steady, wearing jeans, a blue sweater, and the look of someone who had crossed a great distance without traveling far. In her arms, wrapped in the washed yellow blanket, was Lily. For a moment, nobody moved. The yard held its breath. Wind stirred the live oaks. A cardinal flickered red across the fence. Atlas stood slowly, favoring his wrapped paw. Noah started to steady him, but the dog took one careful step forward, then another. Claire lowered herself onto the porch bench, tears already shining in her eyes. Hi, Atlas, she whispered. The German shepherd approached with the gentleness of a creature who understood smallness. He did not jump. He did not push. He stopped inches from Lily and lowered his muzzle until his nose barely touched the edge of the yellow blanket. Lily stirred. Her tiny hand opened, fingers curling toward the fur she had once held in the rain. Atlas froze, as if that touch carried more weight than any metal. Claire began to cry without sound. Noah looked away for a second, not because the moment was too painful, but because it was too holy. There are some things a man should witness with humility. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out the recovered photograph from the minivan, now dried, flattened, and sealed in a clear sleeve. She handed it to Noah. The image was creased, but still visible. Claire's late husband at the flood drive, standing beside Corporal Daniel Mercer, both men smiling over boxes of donated supplies. I found something written on the back, Claire said. Noah turned the photograph over. In faded ink were 6 words. For the one still waiting. Noah read them once. Then again. The yard blurred around the edges. Atlas sat beside Claire's feet, his head resting near Lily's blanket, peaceful in a way Noah had not yet seen. Claire touched the old service plate on his collar. Maybe Daniel never stopped sending help, she said. Noah did not know what to say to that. Some sentences were too small for grace. A breeze moved through the chimes on the porch, and their silver notes drifted above the wet grass. For a little while, they simply sat there together, a marine with mud still beneath his porch boards, a mother holding her child, and a dog who had carried loyalty across a year of storms. When Claire finally stood to leave, Atlas rose too. For one tense second, Noah wondered if the dog would try to follow Lily, as if his mission belonged only to the baby now. But Atlas looked from Lily to Claire, then back to Noah. His ears softened. He stepped close to Lily one last time, touched his nose to the blanket, and returned to Noah's side. Claire smiled through tears. He knows she is safe. Noah rested a hand on Atlas's shoulder. Yes, he said, and maybe now he knows he is too. The van left slowly, disappearing beyond the oaks. Atlas watched until the road was empty. Then he turned, picked up the small blue chew toy from the porch where he had dropped it that morning, and carried it into the house. Noah followed him inside and found the dog placing it carefully on the new bed by the window, not guarding it, not hiding it, simply keeping it there as if he had decided the house was worth leaving something in. That evening, Noah taped a copy of the photograph beside the old marine picture in the hallway. Daniel Mercer's face now looked across the room toward Noah's friends, toward the kitchen where Atlas drank from his bowl, toward the porch where the wind chimes sang in the warm air. The house felt less empty with all those eyes in it. Before bed, Noah stood at the open back door while fireflies blinked over the damp yard. Atlas came beside him, leaned his shoulder against Noah's leg, and released a long breath. No sirens, no floodwater, no lonely road, just crickets, wet grass, and the small sounds of a life beginning again. Noah lowered his hand to the dog's head. "We are still here," he whispered. Atlas closed his eyes, and for once, he did not seem to be listening for someone lost. He seemed to be listening for tomorrow. A week later, the parish held a small gathering behind the fire station, not a ceremony, not the kind with polished speeches and cameras pushed too close, but a quiet morning of folding chairs, paper cups of coffee, and neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder beneath a sky washed clean by rain. The floodwater had gone down enough to reveal what it had taken and what it had spared. Lawns were striped with mud. Mailboxes leaned at tired angles. Along the fence, donated blankets dried in the sun like flags of ordinary mercy. Noah arrived early with Atlas at his side, the German shepherd walking slowly but proudly, his bandaged paw now smaller beneath fresh white gauze. The two tags on his collar chimed together with every step, one scratched by history, one bright with a new address. People noticed him before they noticed Noah. Conversations softened. Children stopped moving. A firefighter who had worked the night of the rescue lowered his coffee and whispered, "That is him." Atlas did not seek attention. He stayed close to Noah's left leg, eyes calm, ears listening, his body no longer trembling at every sudden sound. Near the front row, Claire sat with Lily asleep against her chest, the yellow blanket folded neatly over her arm. When Atlas saw them, he paused. His tail moved once, slow and certain. Claire smiled, and Noah felt the whole morning shift into something gentler. Harold Gaines stood near a portable speaker, holding his cap in both hands. Beside him was a simple wooden table with three things on it: a folded parish rescue vest, a framed copy of the recovered photograph, and a small candle protected from the breeze by a glass jar. Harold cleared his throat. He was not a man built for speeches, and maybe that was why everyone listened. "Last year," he said, "we lost Corporal Daniel Mercer during flood response. We also lost track of his partner, Atlas. Most of us thought that story ended there." He looked toward the dog. Atlas sat beside Noah, still as stone, his amber eyes fixed on the table. Harold's voice softened. "Turns out, some stories do not end when we stop hearing them." No one clapped. It would have felt too loud. The silence held more respect than applause could. Noah looked down and saw Atlas lean forward slightly, nose lifting toward the framed photograph. In it, Daniel Mercer smiled beside Claire's late husband, two men caught in a moment neither of them knew would matter later. Mercy did not announce itself that day. It stood behind a table of supplies, passed diapers from one hand to another, talked about search dogs, smiled for a picture, and waited a year to be understood. Claire rose carefully with Lily in her arms. She walked to the table and placed the yellow blanket beside the rescue vest. "This was hers," she said, voice steady but tender. "And last week, it became his too." She turned toward Atlas. I want Lily to grow up knowing that she was found because someone stayed. Because he stayed. Atlas lowered his head as if the words were too much, or perhaps as if they were exactly enough. Noah felt a hand touch his shoulder. It was Dr. Porter, wearing a clean clinic jacket and mud-stained boots. His paw is healing well, she said quietly. But I think his heart may be farther along than any of us expected. Noah watched Atlas as a little boy approached with permission from his mother, holding out a dog biscuit in a flat palm. Atlas glanced at Noah first. Noah gave a small nod. The shepherd leaned forward and took the biscuit with careful softness, then sat back down as the boy beamed like he had been chosen by a king. Maybe hearts know when they are finally allowed to rest, Noah said. After the gathering, people drifted back to work. There were still houses to clear, meals to deliver, forms to file, roads to repair. Grace had not removed the labor. It had only made the labor feel less lonely. Noah walked Atlas behind the station to a patch of grass where the ground sloped toward a drainage canal, now calm and shallow under the sun. Atlas stopped at the water's edge. Noah felt the leash tighten and braced himself, but the dog did not panic. He only watched the current move slowly past reeds and floating leaves. His ears were relaxed. His breathing was even. The water was water again. Not a battlefield. Not a grave. Not a command. Noah stood beside him for a long time. You can let that road go, he whispered. Atlas looked at him, then back at the canal. A breeze moved across the surface, breaking the reflection of the sky into pieces. Then Atlas stepped away from the water and returned to Noah's side. One step. That was all. But Noah understood what it cost. They drove home in the late afternoon through neighborhoods still rebuilding. Atlas sat upright in the back seat, window cracked just enough for the warm Louisiana air to move through his fur. When they reached the gravel lane, the dog gave a low sound in his throat. Not a warning, not a cry, but something close to recognition. Home had a scent now. Oak leaves, porch wood, chicken, and rice. Noah's hands on the steering wheel. The blue chew toy waiting somewhere near the window. Inside the house, Noah removed Atlas's leash, and the shepherd walked straight to the hallway where the two photographs hung. Daniel Mercer beside Claire's husband. Noah and his old friends in desert sunlight. Atlas sat beneath them for a moment, looking up. Then he reached one paw toward the small blue toy on the floor and nudged it until it rested under the pictures. Noah watched from the kitchen doorway. He did not speak. Some offerings should not be interrupted. That night, thunder rolled far to the south, soft and distant, the leftover voice of a storm that no longer had power over them. Atlas lifted his head from the bed by the window, listened, then laid it down again. Noah sat nearby with a book open in his lap, though he had not turned a page in 20 minutes. The wind chimes moved in the dark. The tags on Atlas's collar rose and fell with his breathing. Old service. New home. Same loyal heart. Before turning off the lamp, Noah checked his phone. Claire had sent another photograph. Lily was awake, her tiny hand wrapped around the edge of the yellow blanket, eyes open toward the light. Beneath it, Claire had written, "She is listening to the rain and smiling." Noah looked at Atlas. The dog's eyes were closed, but his tail moved once, brushing softly against the bed. Maybe he heard Noah's breath change. Maybe he knew. Maybe miracles, once they begin, keep traveling in ways no one can prove. Noah set the phone down and let the quiet fill the room. For the first time in years, the quiet did not feel like absence. It felt like someone had opened a door and left it open. Outside, the damp earth cooled under the stars. Inside, a Marine and a German shepherd slept through the distant thunder, no longer guarding the past, only keeping watch over the fragile peace they had found.